One of the gritty facts of life in Baltimore is the juxtaposition of some industry with some neighborhoods. In South Baltimore, Wagner's Point, which you're seeing live this morning, is one such place, a century-old row house. This is the map that shows you where Wagner's Point is. It's a century-old row house community that started as a little company town. Its residents working in a cannery, but it became, over the years, an island surrounded by chemical and petroleum and wastewater treatment plants along the southern edge of Baltimore. This year, residents started knocking on City Hall's doors, saying they wanted out, complaining that the city has allowed industry to encroach on them for years. Government and private reports cite elevated levels of toxic pollutants in their neighborhood, as well as high risk of industrial accidents. An explosion and fire this past fall at the nearby Condia Vista plant drew more attention to the neighborhood's plight. This is a vigil that was held in the wake of that explosion and fire down there. Now since then, the city is moving toward condemnation of the neighborhood, and a city council vote on the proposal is expected by spring. How are residents feeling about it? We're live with one of the leaders of Wagner's Point, Debbie Hindler, who's right down there in front of her house. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning, Dan.
Good. How are you? Thank you for making some time for us today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be able to come to the city of Baltimore, the people, and let them know what's happening to us. It's a very hard time for us here. As you know, Mr. Rajak, we just lost him Thursday evening.
I want to talk about John Rajak, who's, I believe, is a photograph there on your step, right?
Yes.
Mr. Rajak was one of the community leaders in Wagner's Point. Tell us more about him.
Mr. Rajak came, his wife Louise has lived here since she was born. She's also in the photo. Mr. Rajak met his wife here at the church that used to be here, and they married and came here to live and raise their children. Mr. Rajak has been very active in the past few years, past year, 2 years, trying to get his family out of here. It's a dangerous situation. Mr. Rajak had leukemia. We believe, because of living here. He doesn't want this to happen to anyone else. It shouldn't have happened to him. Just since we've gone to the mayor and asked for the relocation, we have lost 2 of our members, Mr. Rajak and Jeanette Skurzik.
Mr. Rajak said, I'm quoting here a story in yesterday's Sun, his obituary in yesterday's Sun by Joe Matthews of the Sun, who'll be joining us shortly. So put this in my obituary: I should be the last person to die in Wagner's Point. Are you hopeful, Debbie, that this is actually going to happen this year, that there'll be a settlement on this and that folks will actually have to be moving out of Wagner's Point before the end of the year? Do you think that'll actually happen in 1999?
All of my prayers ask for that, believe me. Things are getting closer than when we first asked to be relocated. The city has come and appraised our homes. However, we are at a stalemate with the city. They've stalled the process, the negotiation process, because they're waiting for eminent domain to go forward. Mm-hmm. It is our belief that they could continue the process, negotiation with us, and have everything in place so that when eminent domain, if it's necessary to go through, we could get out as quickly and as soon as possible.
Right. We're looking at scenes all around you on Wagner's Point. It's kind of amazing if folks have never been down there. It's essentially just a few streets, really a long row of row houses there, surrounded by these plants that I mentioned before and that we were just looking at. And Debbie, it's been quite a while that the folks down there have been banging on City Hall for relief, because industry has continued to encroach on the neighborhood over the decades, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. We have not only asked the city of Baltimore to help us relocate. This has been a process that we've asked both the state, federal, city government, and the surrounding industries to help us relocate. Mm-hmm. The governor came and visited with Senator Mikulski when Senator Mikulski announced to the community and to the residents that there would be a $750,000 appropriation from the federal government for our elderly and disabled. I'm going to have to... You're not going to be able to hear me here.
Yeah, we can still hear you, Debbie. Going right through the neighborhood. Well, Debbie, we'll take a break, okay?
I'm sorry, I couldn't
You're
hear.
probably having trouble hearing me.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you, yes.
That's all right. We're going to take a break anyway, and we'll come back and talk with you some more, all right?
Thank you.
That's what we'll do. We'll take a break, and we'll come back more on Wagner's Point. What it's been like to live there all these years, and what it's like to face losing your neighborhood. And Joe Matthews, a Sun reporter who's covered the Wagner's Point story from top to bottom, will be with us as well. We'll be right back. More from Jermaine Gardner on the piano.
I don't know about you, but I often
We've got a lot
stop and
going on
wonder,
again, as usual, in and outside of the studio. First of all, here's a live glimpse by our breakfast camera of the neighborhood of Wagner's Point, the small South Baltimore neighborhood that has been so much in the news this past year. Only about 270 people live in Wagner's Point now. It's a neighborhood surrounded by oil tank farms and chemical plants, and concerned about their quality of life and their health are the residents, and the residents have asked for a government buyout of their homes. And that's in the works. It has been a very emotional time for the people of Wagner's Point. And just 2 days ago, one of their neighborhood leaders died after a long fight with leukemia. We're going to talk with some of the folks in Wagner's Point this morning about him, about the past and the future for that neighborhood. And at the turn of the century, people who lived in Wagner's Point, worked at Martin Wagner's vegetable cannery. As the century ends, the neighborhood is surrounded by industrial, chemical, and petroleum plants, and the city of Baltimore is looking to condemn the last of the row houses of Wagner's Point. Welcome back. We're talking with folks in Wagner's Point this morning. This year it seems likely that 270 people who remain there will get their walking papers, so to speak. There are commitments from the city, state, and federal governments, as well as industry, to fund their relocation. With us is Joe Matthews, who's covered the story for the Sun. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks.
And also we're joined by Debbie Hindla in Wagner's Point, along with Mr. Andy Skurzik. Hello, Mr. Skurzik. How are you?
Okay, fine.
Mr. Skurzik, a longtime resident of Wagner's Point. His wife, Jeanette, was a fighter for the neighborhood, and she died of cancer last April at the age of 56. That's a photograph of her there?
Yeah, it is.
Jeanette. The death of Jeanette Skurzik sort of was an important point, sort of a milestone in that neighborhood, wasn't it? Tragic as it was, it got things moving, didn't it?
I think it was certainly one of those things. I mean, the first time I went to Wagner's Point in 1995 and smelled the air, I wondered why people
would live
there.
Mm.
And they liked the crime, the lack of crime. They liked the fact that it was, family. And Wagner's Point is basically a neighborhood of 8 sort of extended clans.
Mm-hmm.
But her death and a couple of accidents at the FMC plant there, which makes pesticides and herbicides, really spooked people, and really sort of changed the whole attitude of people towards the neighborhood.
Mr. Skurzik, I just wanted to speak with you a little bit this morning about how you're feeling these days, as it looks more and more serious now that the city will move to condemn and you'll move on. What are your feelings about this today?
My feelings, like what Debbie was saying, is the right thing to do, because we're surrounded by all these chemical plants, and it seems like they're closing in on us too. They're getting larger and larger and larger, and they're just closing us in.
You know, there's something maybe people don't appreciate. They might look at this story and say, well, why does anybody, like you say, why does anybody live there? But the fact is that people live there, as I said, since the turn of the century. It's industry that moved into the neighborhood, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was here before the industry was here. Well, before most of it.
Mm-hmm. There's a live shot of industry near Wagner's Point. Now, last fall, this is another sort of a strange thing that happened. It was, to some people, a godsend, to others, this horrific thing, the explosion and fire at Condia Vista. Yeah. I mean, it drew more attention to the plight of the people in Wagner's Point, didn't it?
Well, it was both, and the timing was for the purposes of people wanting to get out perfect. 3 weeks before governor going up for re-election, with that happening, he came down there and was surrounded by 100 people,
right.
It's who are spooked, and it's hard to say no to them. And he left, having promised to give up to $2 million to help them relocate.
Mm-hmm. There's also been a commitment from Condia Vista, too, right, to where this accident took place.
Well, they've agreed to negotiate. These residents asked and have written to 10 of the chemical and oil companies. They're asking to help. Vista is the only one so far to agree to do it. A lot of the others don't want to do it, and point out with some justification that there's not what science there is. Doesn't make it at all clear that anyone's getting sick because of what's down there. You know, the science on this stuff there's very little of it.
But you can just go there as a citizen and drive through and say, well, people don't belong here anymore. Right? Well, can't you? Maybe it's not that simple.
It's not.
But that could be your visceral reaction to it.
Sure. I mean, it sure was mine the first time I was down there.
Yeah. Debbie, tell us where things stand with the city and condemnation as of today.
The condemnation process has been stalled at this. The city is moving forward trying to get condemnation to go through. However, the citizens, the residents who live here, don't want that to happen. We want to negotiate. We want to be able to get out of here without being told you have to get out. The governor has given us the 5% low-interest loans, but these don't apply to everyone, and those who they do apply to, it would cause a difference in in monthly expenses from the expenses they pay living in Wagner's Point to where they would have to pay much more to leave the community and live somewhere else. This would cause a hardship for many people, and that's why we're concerned that this just won't be enough.
Debbie, what happened at the meeting the other night? You had an association meeting. Can you tell us what happened there?
With our community association?
Yeah.
Well, we've organized a subcommittee to handle the industry portion, because the industry portion is a very important portion. At this point, Condia Vista has come forward and decided that they would like to participate in negotiations to help us get out. They have not committed to any dollar amounts at this time, and they are the only ones who have come forward. It's necessary that the others do come forward. FNC has had accidents. My son suffered severe nosebleeds after the gas plume that was released in May. This can't continue to happen. They all need to join together and help us get out. A good neighbor fund is necessary for a true, fair negotiation and relocation.
Mr. Skurzik, you must have some mixed emotions, though. I understand you're behind the effort to get out and get some closure to Wagner's Point, but it is a neighborhood where you have a lot of memories. You must have some conflicting feelings about it.
It's going to be very difficult to replace, in fact, it's going to be impossible to replace the friendship and family sense that's here. Everyone knows everyone here. My children could go to any door and knock on it and know that they're welcome. But see, you don't even have to worry about that, because in this neighborhood, it's like you were living when I grew up. You can go to the corner store for your mother and buy milk and not be afraid that someone's going to attack you on the way. It doesn't happen here. This is a peaceful community neighborhood that we won't be able to replace that.
Joe Matthews, it looks like this will happen this year. The city, huh? You're not sure?
Well, I mean, who knows?
It's in the city council, right?
Well, it is, but it's being held up there partly by the residents themselves who don't like the idea of eminent domain and want to negotiate. So it's hard. There's still a lot of pieces in the air. There are companies to be asked. And, you know, this is precedent setting. Never, if both government and industry contribute to a buyout, that's never been done before.
Never been done? I thought Condia Vista was involved in one.
It has. They've been buyouts, but they've always been done by either by industry, a particular company that's usually done something wrong, or a government that is trying to head off lawsuits, but never together. And that's really hard to put all the pieces of that together.
Well, we'll watch that again, and we send out our sympathies again to everyone in Wagner's Point who knew John Regic. Is that right? Yeah. R-E-G-I-E-C. And we thank Debbie Hindler and Andy for being with us this morning on the steps down there. By the way, what street are you on, Debbie?
4th Avenue.
4th Avenue. And that right behind you, the big tank there, belongs to whom?
That belongs to Citgo.
Citgo.
The 200 trucks a day that go past my house come out of there. That's the reason why I couldn't hear you earlier.
Yeah. Well, I wish you luck, and thank you for your time, Debbie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Andy.
Okay, bye.
John and Joe, great work on Wagner's Point for the Sun. I'm congratulating you for a lot of good work and good stories there, including, unfortunately, yesterday, Mr. Rodricks' obituary. But thank you for being with us. Still ahead.